Hello, welcome to the Southern Bible Thumper channel. For this upload, we will be reading 2 Samuel 15. And it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. Absalom said, Moreover, Oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. And it was so that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. And it came to pass, after 40 years, that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Jeshurun in Syria, saying, If the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said unto him, Go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. And when Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. And there came a messenger to David, saying, The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, Arise and let us flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servants said unto the king, Behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. And the king went forth, and all his household after him. And the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off. And all his servants passed on beside him, and all the Shurithites, and all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, Wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and also an exile. Whereas thou camest but yesterday. Should I this day make thee go up and down with us? Seeing I go whither I may, return thou and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. And Ittai answered the king and said, As the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth, surely in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in life whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. And David said to Ittai, Go and pass over. And Ittai, the Gittite, passed over, and all his men, and all the little ones that were with him, and all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. The king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. And to Zadok also, and all the Levites were with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had done passing out of the city. And the king said unto Zadok, Carry back the ark of God into the city. If I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again, and shew me both it and his habitation. But if he thus say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here am I. Let him do to me as seemeth good unto him. The king said also unto Zadok the priest, Art not thou a seer? Return into the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz thy son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will tarry in the plain of the wilderness, until there come word from you to certify me. Zadok, therefore, and Abiathar carried the ark of God again to Jerusalem, and they tarried there. And David went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet, and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot. And all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up weeping as they went up. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. And it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount where he worshipped God, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and earth upon his head. Unto whom David said, If thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant hitherto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. And hast thou not there with thee Zadok and Abiathar the priests? Therefore it shall be that what things soever thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Behold, they have there with them their two sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them ye shall send unto me everything that ye can hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. In the previous chapter, 2 Samuel 14, Joab, David's army captain, finds a woman and has her bring a claim to David to judge. The issue Joab creates is one where a widowed woman has a son that killed his brother. Her family now wants to kill the murderous son. After agreeing to keep the woman's son safe, David finds out Joab orchestrated this decision as a way to legally bring Absalom, who was David's son, back to the kingdom. In our current chapter, 2 Samuel 15, Absalom, David's son, who had his brother Amnon murdered, plots a hostile takeover of the kingdom 40 years later. Absalom slowly gains the approval of Israel. David has to flee, leaving behind his 10 concubines. David instructs 2 priests and 1 friend to continue to serve in Absalom's kingdom, reporting to David as informants. Summarizing 2 Samuel chapter 15. In this chapter, Absalom, David's son, organizes a hostile takeover. The breakdown in this family started in 2 Samuel 11. David took Bathsheba, who was a married woman, impregnated her, and had her husband killed, and then married her. When we get to 2 Samuel 12, Nathan, who is David's prophet, gives David a message from God saying that because of what you did to that man, your household will live by the sword. And the Lord says, I'm going to bring disaster on you from your own family. In 2 Samuel chapter 13, Amnon, one of David's sons, he sexually assaults Tamar, one of David's daughter. Absalom is Tamar's brother. David does nothing about this assault for 2 years. Absalom takes matters into his own hands and has Amnon killed. Then he flees the territory and lives in a different city for some time. In the last chapter, David's army captain Joab notices how much David misses his son, and so he brings a woman to pretend she's a widow in a similar scenario to David. And the point of this was to get a judgment that's generous so that that same judgment can be applied to David's relationship with Absalom. The generous judgment, the woman was in a similar situation where one of her sons killed the other, and now her family wants to kill the remaining son, who was the murderer. David offers a generous judgment, saying that he will protect her and the son. And then she tells him, well, the situation applies to you and your household. David realizes what Joab is trying to do and tells Joab, go and bring Absalom back into the kingdom. For 2 years, Absalom doesn't speak to David. David says he doesn't want to see him. And Absalom has to make a request for David to talk to him. And then David doesn't even respond right away. He summons Absalom at his convenience. So now in this chapter, Absalom, the same son that had his brother murdered, he's now waiting at the city gate, offering judgments or resolving grievances. This was the king's job. So in the previous chapter, when the woman that Joab got, when she brought that issue to the king for a decision, that's that's what the king was supposed to do. Everyone probably knows that Absalom is David's son, but this what he's doing is he's placing himself in a position that was not his. He stood at the city gate, so it was easy for everyone to get to. Because he wasn't king, he didn't have to have someone summon him, and he responds at his convenience. And the other thing, um, when a person approached to pay homage. So, as we saw in the previous chapter, every time someone came to talk to the king, they have to fall on their face and do obeisance and be humble. Okay. In verse 5, when people came to Absalom, he reached out his hand and kissed them instead of having them bow with their faces to the ground. So, just consider how different that is. And he's making these comments to these people, asking them, "Where are you from?" "Oh, yeah. It seems like you have a pretty good case, but you just don't even have anyone to listen to you. But if I were the judge, I would make sure you were able to get heard." Or political campaigns before we even have real politics. Okay. I'm not going to say any more comments after that. That's the last comment. Okay. I have to tell myself that. This sarcasm just comes out so easily. Okay. So Absalom is starting to win over the hearts of Israel because he's acting as a king without being the king. He's sowing seeds of discord by, well, if I were king, you wouldn't have to go through all that rigmarole. You don't have to bow to me. I'm just like you. Verse 7 is particularly interesting because at every translation it says 4 years, except for the King James and the New King James. In my opinion, the New King James is just the King James with a little razzle dazzle. I personally feel like the New King James is a useless translation, but that is my opinion. When we get into the interlinear, okay, the interlinear is the closest translation we have to the original form. The original form of the Bible is written in Hebrew. When we get down to verse 7, and it came to pass after 40 years. So we see these two say 40 years, but the rest says 4 years. And this isn't, in the grand scheme of things, this isn't a huge difference, but there is a difference in between the hearts of Israel being won over in 4 years versus Absalom having to put in work for 40 years to earn the credibility from Israel. Israel doesn't have such a great reputation of being faithful Christians. I just also think the distinction isn't made how long we're talking about Israel. We're talking about multiple generations that have had several types of leadership. So, verse 7, when the 4 years passed, Absalom told David that he wanted to go to the city Hebron to fulfill a vow that he made when he was living away from Jerusalem. So after he had his brother killed, he fled and lived in a different city. I don't think it was Hebron, but that's not the point. The point is he's going to Hebron He gets the blessing of King David. And what he's doing there is getting the people of Hebron to agree that when they hear the sound of the ram's horn, to declare him king. Now, the Bible doesn't specify if this is like a race, if enough people say one person is king, but we did see when the tribe of Judah, wanted David to be king over them, how quickly Saul's army captain, Abner, used his political influence to make sure Saul's son Ishbosheth became king of the rest of Israel. So Judah declared for one king, the rest of Israel, the other 11 tribes, agreed to Saul's son being the king of the rest of them. So it was after David accepted his role as king, he sent word to the other 11 tribes letting them know, okay, I'm king of here. And that's when Abner hurried up and made sure to have a second king. So the reason why I'm even mentioning that is because this must be important. Time must be important when someone is announced king to make sure that person can uh, establish themselves as the leader. So, okay. In verse 11, we learn that when Absalom leaves Jerusalem, he has 200 men who don't know Absalom's real plan. He offers sacrifices and invites David's advisor. I mentioned this in the chapter 13 because chapter 13 was when uh, David's daughter was assaulted. And when Amnon began having this fixation with Tamar, David had another family member that was in the kingdom named Jonadab. Jonadab talked to Amnon and helped him come up with the idea of how to get Tamar alone so that he could have her. These are the kind of people that were in David's life after Absalom has Amnon killed. There's this rumor that goes back to David saying that all of his sons are killed, which wasn't true. But the point that I was trying to make in that chapter was David has all these different women, all these different children, all these different people around him, and because there's so many different types of energies, we see him now having people that shouldn't even be in his kingdom. His counselors should not be advising Absalom over him. Verse 13, David finds out about his counselor linking up with Absalom. In verse 14, David says to his servants that they have to leave. That they may face a threat of war with Absalom. The king's servants decide to be faithful, and King David leaves behind 10 concubines. So when they get to the edge of the city, the king says to Ittai, he says, "You're foreigners and you just got here yesterday and you're living in exile. I'm going to be fleeing and I don't know where I'm going to go. You're not required to come with me." Ittai vows to be faithful. So David said, "Cool." Verse 23 is significant as well because as David and his men were leaving, the people of Israel were crying. So we get here Abiathar and Zadok and the Levites were carrying the Ark of the Covenant because they planned to leave with David. David tells them to stay there. And he says, if I find favor with God, he'll bring me back. But if I don't, He can do whatever pleases him. David asks these two men, Zadok and Abiathar, he says, return and serve in Absalom's kingdom and become my informant. So they return. Verse 30, David has to again flee his home and job. He's fleeing his job, he's fleeing his home, he's fleeing everything now because of his son. He's crying and barefoot. And the people with him covered their heads and cried as well. Verse 31, we find David finds out that Ahithophel, David's counselor who he trusted, is among the conspirators. David asks God, please turn his counsel into foolishness. Please let nothing he say work. Then we get verse 32 to 37. Hushai is one of David's friends. David tells him, if you go with me, you're going to be a burden. Stay here and work for me as an informant along with Zadok and Abiathar. So Hushai returns just as Absalom was entering into the city. That is all we have for this chapter. Thank you so much for clicking on and watching the video. I love you. Have a wonderful day.